It began with chains, but it ended with a storm dot in the early 19th century. One enslaved cook found himself trapped aboard a ship bound for misery. He was supposed to feed the crew, not lead them. Yet what happened next defied every rule written by those who thought they owned him. In a single daring act, he turned captivity into rebellion and gave freedom to 135 souls. This isn't fiction. It's one of history's most overlooked revolts, hidden beneath the waves of time. How did a man born in bondage outwit an empire? If stories like this move you, hit like and subscribe. It helps us uncover forgotten chapters of human courage. Share this video so more people know the truth that history tried to bury. The ocean was calm that morning, but nothing about the journey was peaceful. The ship creaked under the weight of its human cargo men, women, and children, chained in the dark belly below deck. The air smelled of salt, sweat, and fear. Above, sailors shouted orders. Below, muffled cries echoed through the hull. Every wave carried them farther from home, closer to a fate none had chosen. The vessel was part of a brutal system that turned people into profit. Each name erased, replaced by a number, a weight, a price. To the ship's owners, these were not human beings. They were inventory, but inside every captive, there burned a will that could not be tallied. And among them was one man quiet, watchful, and underestimated. The cook. He was unshackled like the others. He moved between decks, carrying food, water, and scraps of information. To the sailors, he was invisible. To the captives, he was a faint glimmer of hope. In silence, he studied everything, the guards, the weapons, the keys, the tides. He saw weakness in places others saw walls. This was not his first voyage. He knew the trade routes, the captain's habits, and how the winds shifted before a storm. Every small detail mattered, because someday he knew one moment would come, an opening that could never be wasted. No one suspected what was building beneath the deck. The cook's eyes saw beyond the horizon. He wasn't planning survival. He was planning freedom. And soon, the ship that carried chains would sail into history as the stage of one of the boldest revolts ever recorded. Before the uprising, he was just a shadow moving between decks. His name was whispered only among those who dared to dream of freedom. To the crew, he was a background figure, the man who served their meals, scrubbed their pots, and stayed silent. But silence can be deceptive. Beneath his calm, something sharp was forming. He had seen too much to remain still. Years of bondage had taught him how power moved, how men hid fear behind cruelty, and how small acts could shift great forces. He watched how the captain barked orders. He noticed how keys hung loosely from belts. He marked the moments when the ship grew quiet, when half the crew slept, when opportunity breathed. The kitchen gave him access others didn't have. He handled knives, boiling water, heavy ladles, tools of survival that could become weapons. And every day, while feeding the men who thought they owned him, he memorized the rhythm of their routine. The cook's world became a map of weakness, but what made him dangerous wasn't strength. It was patience. He understood that a single reckless move would doom them all. So he waited, biding time, gaining trust, blending in. A smile when they mocked him, a nod when they gave orders. Every gesture crafted to make himself small, forgettable. What they didn't see was the mind beneath that calm face, a strategist disguised as a servant. Every dish he served brought him one step closer to rebellion. And when the moment came, it would strike not from fury, but from precision. The cook they overlooked was about to become the leader they'd never forget. The ship was more than a vessel. It was a machine of control. Every sound, every order, every chain served a purpose, to remind those below that escape was impossible. The hold was packed tight, row after row of bodies pressed together, stripped of identity, but not of spirit. The stench of sickness filled the air. Some prayed, Others stared blankly, their minds drifting far from the waves dot above deck. The crew moved with brutal efficiency. Orders barked. Whips cracked. Food came in metal pots, thrown without care. The cook saw it all. He moved between two worlds, the cruelty above, the suffering below. And each trip deepened his resolve. Every corner of the ship told a story of control. The captain's quarters guarded maps and pistols. The armory, locked tight, held the tools of fear. Even the ropes that bound the sails symbolized the tight grip of power. The ship sailed forward, but for those chained beneath, time stood still. Sometimes, at night, the cook would pause near the galley door and listen. The sea's endless rhythm mixed with soft cries and whispered prayers. It was in those moments he felt the weight of what he planned. Failure would mean death, but silence already felt like a slow one. Among the enslaved, small sparks began to spread, looks exchanged, nods of understanding. The cook never spoke openly. He didn't need to. His eyes carried the promise that something was coming. The ship thought itself unbreakable. Yet every fortress carries cracks. And somewhere within that floating prison, one man was finding them, one by one dot. It began with whispers. Nothing more. A word passed between breaths, hidden beneath the sound of waves. The cook never gave speeches. He didn't need to. His courage spread like smoke, unseen but impossible to contain. Among the enslaved, trust was dangerous. One wrong word could mean a beating or worse. So every exchange was quiet, careful. A glance, a hand gesture, a look that said, "Wait for my signal." In a world built on fear, silence became their shield. The cook's position gave him reach. He carried food below deck, spoke to men and women chained in darkness, and left behind hope where there had been none. Slowly, he built something that could not be seen. Unity. He knew the risks. Revolts had failed before. Many had ended in blood, their leaders hanged as warnings. But he also knew the cost of doing nothing. Each mile they sailed meant another lost future. And so, quietly, the plan took shape. He studied the ship's routines. The night watches. The weapons storage. The tides. He memorized how many crews stood guard when they changed shifts and how fast they could respond to noise. The uprising couldn't rely on chance. It had to be precise. To the crew, the cook was still harmless. They saw only a man serving meals, cleaning messes, bowing his head. They never noticed how his eyes scanned every key, every knot, every blind spot on deck. Every plan begins as a whisper. Soon, those whispers would rise. And when they did, the world would hear them. The sea was black that night. No moan, only the groan of timber and the steady crash of waves. The crew slept easily, unaware that beneath their feet, history was waking. The cook moved silently through the galley. His hands trembled, but his eyes were steady. He checked the knives, the boiling water, the ropes, everything that could become a weapon. Around him, a few trusted men waited. Their faces shone with sweat, fear, and something else. Resolve. When the hour came. It began not with shouting, but with a single sound, a door creaking open. Then another. Chains fell to the floor. Freedom's first breath was quiet, but once the first blow struck, silence vanished. The enslaved surged upward, strength born from years of pain. The cook led the way, striking fast before alarm could spread. The first guard never saw it coming. The second stumbled back, calling out, "Too late." Panic tore through the crew as fire lit the deck, casting shadows that looked like ghosts reclaiming life. Every strike echoed a lifetime of rage. Some of the enslaved grabbed weapons, others tackled guards with bare hands. The ship became chaos, shouts, smoke, and blood mixing with salt air. The captain burst from his quarters, pistol drawn, but the cook was faster. One move, one chance, and the man who had ruled over chains fell to the deck. The ship, once a symbol of control, now belonged to those it had tried to break. And as dawn began to glow at the horizon, one truth burned brighter than the fires on board. They had done the impossible. The sun rose on a ship reborn. Smoke drifted from the deck. Torn sails snapped in the wind, and bodies lay scattered where the struggle had raged. The enslaved stood free, but freedom on the open sea was a fragile thing. They had taken the vessel, but the ocean was now their enemy. Few among them knew how to sail. The cook understood some navigation, but not enough to outmatch the storms or the endless horizon. Without crew or captain, the victory felt both triumphant and terrifying. He gave orders with calm authority, guiding those who could row, patching holes, tending to the wounded. They dumped barrels of rum overboard to prevent chaos. The cook knew the taste of drunken celebration could destroy them before the Empire ever did, but the sea showed no mercy. Waves rose like walls. Food grew scarce. Thirst burned. Some wanted to turn back. Others demanded they press on. The cook listened, but his mind stayed fixed on one thing: land. Any land that wasn't under the flag of chains. At night, the survivors huddled together, hands clasped, eyes searching for stars. Each gust of wind felt like judgment. The ship that had once carried them to slavery now carried their last hope. And the cook, who had dared to lead them, felt the full weight of every life aboard. Days passed. Sails tattered. Voices grew weak. Yet through hunger and fear, one truth held firm. They would rather die free on the waves than live another moment in chains. The sea tested them, but their spirit held. And somewhere beyond that endless blue, land waited. And somewhere beyond that endless blue, land waited. Days blurred into nights. The ocean stretched forever, offering no promise of rescue. But then, one morning, a cry rang out from the bow land. Faint at first, then clear against the dawn. The ship's survivors rushed forward, eyes wide, hearts pounding. For the first time since their capture, hope had shape. The cook stood still, watching the shoreline rise from the mist. He didn't know what waited there, freedom or another trap. But they had come too far to turn back. Every wave that struck the hull reminded him of the cost paid in blood. This land, whatever it was, had to mean something. He gathered the group, steady and calm. Some wept, others stared in silence. They would need supplies, water, and caution. The cook knew that freedom wasn't a single moment. It was a fight that continued long after the chains were gone. As they drew closer, the island's beaches gleamed white beneath the sun. Birds circled overhead. Palm trees swayed. It looked like paradise, but he had learned never to trust appearances. The cook sent scouts first. When they returned, their smiles told the story. No soldiers, no overseers, no flags. Just open land and fresh water. When the first foot touched shore, the air seemed to shift. The cries that followed were not of pain, but release. One by one, they fell to their knees, pressing their hands into the sand as if claiming it with their breath. For the first time, they were unbound. Not property, not prisoners, just people standing under an open sky. Freedom, however, never goes unnoticed. Word of the uprising spread fast. The ship that vanished did not stay lost for long. When traders and patrols learned what had happened, that an enslaved cook had led a rebellion and freed over 100 people, outrage tore through the colonies. To the Empire. This was more than mutiny. It was contagion. A single act of defiance could ignite others. If one man could seize a ship, what stopped others from doing the same? Letters rushed across oceans. Orders were issued. Rewards offered for capture. The hunt began. Ships were dispatched to search the trade routes. Ports tightened security. Captains armed themselves heavier than before. Every freedman became a suspect. every cook a potential threat. The Empire's power relied on fear, and this story shattered that illusion. Back on land, the survivors hid among coastal villages. Some blended in, others moved inland, hoping distance would protect them. The cook knew they couldn't stay forever. He saw the sails on the horizon, imperial colors closing in. The sea that had tested them was now bringing their pursuers. He gathered the freed once more. They had beaten chains and storms, but now they faced something colder: revenge. The Empire wanted to erase them, to make this uprising vanish like a rumor on the wind, yet the story could not be contained. Sailors whispered of it in ports. Merchants spoke of the ghost ship that turned on its masters. Even in distant colonies, enslaved men and women heard the tale and dared to imagine their own escape. What began as one ship's rebellion was becoming a symbol dot in the end. Freedom demanded its final price. The cook who had defied an empire could not remain hidden forever. The search tightened around him, each day narrowing the space between survival and capture. He had led others to freedom, yet his own would come at a cost. Accounts differ on how his story closed. Some say he was caught by bounty hunters, dragged back in chains to face the fury of those he had humiliated. Others claim he vanished into the interior, living out his days among freed people, teaching them how to resist. History offers no clear answer, only silence where his name should have been. That silence speaks volumes. Empires record victories, not humiliations. They write laws, not rebellions. But every erased line hides a truth too dangerous to forget. That one enslaved man, armed with nothing but wit, patience, and courage, had turned the tools of oppression into weapons of liberation. If he was captured, he would have known the risks. He never fought for glory. He fought so others might breathe unchained air. And if he escaped, if he truly vanished, then perhaps that was justice. A man who refused to die a slave, living on his own terms. Those he freed carried his memory, telling his story in fragments and whispers. Over time, it drifted across oceans, reshaped by each tongue that spoke it. But beneath every version lay the same truth. One man's defiance had split open the illusion of control. History may not have given him a name, but his act gave countless others a reason to hope. Long after the ship was gone, its story refused to sink. Sailors spoke of it in hushed tones, afraid and amazed. A vessel once built for bondage had become a symbol of rebellion. The ocean that had carried chains now carried whispers of freedom. Historians tried to bury the tale. Records vanished. Names were lost. Yet across generations, the legend survived, passed from mouth to mouth, carried by those who saw themselves in the cook's courage. His revolt became more than an event. It became a reminder of what even the powerless can do when they refuse to accept their fate. Each uprising that followed, in plantations, in ports, on other ships, bore echoes of his defiance. The Empire learned a truth it could never fully erase. Fear might keep people quiet, but it could never keep them obedient forever. Today, the cook's name may be forgotten, but his act endures in every story of resistance that followed. His hands, once forced to serve, reshaped destiny. His plan, born in silence, shattered centuries of control. He turned a ship meant for suffering into a vessel of freedom. If you listen closely to the sea, some say you can still hear it. The creak of the deck, the rush of wind, the roar of voices rising in defiance. A ship reclaimed. A people reborn. He was never meant to lead. Yet he did. Never meant to win. Yet he changed everything. The cook who hijacked a ship did more than free 135 souls. He proved that even in the darkest hold, light can find a way to rise. History remembers kings, conquerors, and empires. But it often forgets the quiet hands that rewrote destiny. One cook. One ship. One act of defiance that cracked the foundation of slavery itself. He didn't have weapons or titles, only courage, patience, and an unbreakable will dot, and though time erased his name, it could never erase his legacy because some revolutions aren't written in ink. They're carved into the silence, carried by the wind, and whispered by the waves that once bore chains. Now, they carry freedom. They carry freedom.